A man discovers his wife is transgender just hours before she dies in their apartment. What really happened? In the beginning, life with Evelyn felt like a dream James never wanted to wake up from. Their tiny apartment in Brooklyn, with its creaky floors and mismatched furniture, somehow felt like the most perfect place on earth. Mornings were slow and filled with the smell of fresh coffee and quiet laughter. Evenings meant long walks through Prospect Park or splitting a bottle of wine on the fire escape under string lights they'd hung together. There was a kind of magic in the mundane. James adored Evelyn, not in the dramatic, over-the-top way you see in movies, but in the quiet, constant way that grows from trust and genuine affection. She had this effortless charm, a sharp wit that could catch him off guard, and a way of looking at the world that made him want to be better, softer, more present. He trusted her with everything, his past, his future, his vulnerabilities. For the first time in his life, James felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be, with exactly who he was meant to be with. At first, James didn't think much of it. New York has a way of making people guarded. Everyone's carrying their own weight, their own past. So when Evelyn occasionally sidestepped questions about her childhood or old friends, he chalked it up to privacy. Respect, even. We all have chapters we don't read out loud. But slowly, those moments began to build, like condensation on a window you don't notice until it blurs the whole view. There were times when Evelyn would shut down mid-conversation, especially when James asked about family or where she went to school. She'd smile, deflect, change the subject. He let it go again and again, trusting that when she was ready, she'd share. That's what love is, right? Still, something didn't sit right. She was always careful with what she said and how much. She never let him help with her mail. She kept a locked drawer in the bedroom, brushed off his curiosity with a kiss and a laugh. There were phone calls she took behind closed doors, and once, when he walked in on one, she ended it too fast, her voice tense in a way he hadn't heard before. James tried not to spiral. He told himself not to become that guy, paranoid, insecure. But the more he loved her, the more he felt like there was a wall between them. And not the kind that time or tenderness could fix. It wasn't just about unanswered questions anymore. It was a feeling, a weight in his chest when she looked away too quickly, or flinched at a simple "tell me more." One night, lying in bed beside her, listening to the hum of the radiator and the city beyond their window, James stared at the ceiling and wondered if the woman he loved was keeping something from him. Something big, and the scariest part, he wasn't sure if he wanted to know. It happened on a Sunday, one of those slow, gray mornings when the city feels almost gentle, the streets quieter, the sirens fewer, and the usual rhythm of chaos softened just a bit. Evelyn had gone out early to meet a friend for brunch. James stayed behind, planning to finally deal with the cluttered hallway drawer, the one they both kept ignoring, where menus, receipts, and random junk went to die. He wasn't looking for anything, just trying to feel useful. He found an old laptop buried underneath some magazines. Evelyn's, it was still logged in. He knew he shouldn't have opened it. He wasn't a snoop. But curiosity, or maybe some leftover unease, got the better of him. One unread email caught his eye, the subject line simple: "Proud of you." It was from someone named Claire, a name he didn't recognize. Maybe a cousin, maybe a friend. He clicked. The message wasn't long, but it didn't need to be. Claire wrote with warmth, talking about how proud she was of Evelyn for living her truth, how happy she was that Evelyn had found someone to love, and how maybe, just maybe, it was time to tell him the full story. That word, transition. James read it once, then again. His stomach dropped. His mind went blank, then exploded with noise, flashes of late-night conversations, the way Evelyn avoided questions about her past, the locked drawer, the quiet sadness she sometimes carried like a shadow. It all came rushing back, sharper now, clearer. Evelyn was transgender, and she hadn't told him. For a long time, he just sat there, the city outside their window buzzing along as if nothing had changed. But for James, everything had. Not because she was trans, but because she hadn't said anything. Because every moment of intimacy, every whispered "I love you," now carried a question mark he didn't know how to answer. He felt blindsided, like someone had pulled the rug out from under the life they'd built together. And then came the guilt. Was he wrong for feeling betrayed? Was his hurt justified, or was he just ... overwhelmed, broken open by something he didn't fully understand? The truth was, he didn't know what he felt, only that it hurt, deeply. And that it was about far more than the email. James left the apartment without a word. No coat, no wallet. Just his keys and a head full of noise he couldn't turn down. He wandered the streets of Brooklyn, past bodegas and bus stops, through puddles left by last night's rain. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he couldn't stay. His mind kept looping back to the email. The word transition kept ringing in his ears like an unanswered question. He wasn't angry at Evelyn for being trans, at least not in the way people might assume. He was angry because she hadn't told him. Because she had made him believe there were no big secrets between them. Because for a year, he'd built a life with her, wrapped his love around her, without knowing something so central to who she was. By the time night fell, James was sitting alone at a bar in Lower Manhattan, his third bourbon in hand, watching a muted Mets game and trying not to think. But the thoughts came anyway, the laughter they used to share, the way Evelyn would rest her head on his chest when she couldn't sleep, the way she once whispered, "You make me feel safe." He didn't feel safe now. He felt betrayed, small, broken. He stumbled back to the apartment sometime past midnight. The door was unlocked, the lights were low. Evelyn was sitting on the couch, knees pulled to her chest, her eyes puffy and red. She looked up when he came in, cautiously, hopefully. "James," she said quietly, like his name might shatter if said too loud. "Can we talk?" But he didn't want to talk. Not then. He was raw, still riding the edge of liquor and heartbreak. What began as a strained conversation quickly unraveled into shouting. Words like liar, "Why didn't you tell me?" and "How could you cut through the air like broken glass?" Evelyn tried to explain. She said she was scared. That she wanted to tell him but didn't know how. That she thought maybe he'd leave, that maybe he'd stop loving her. "I had to survive," she said, voice cracking. "You don't know what it's like." But James wasn't listening, not really. He was lashing out, not just at her, but at everything, his shame, his confusion, the version of himself that thought he was a good man. He felt like he was drowning, and she was the wave that pulled him under. And then it happened, one sharp moment, a flash of anger. He raised his voice, she stepped back. He moved toward her, not to hurt her, he would say later, just to make a point. Just to stop her from walking away, but she lost her footing. She fell hard, backwards, her head hitting the corner of the coffee table with a sickening crack. The room went still, so still. "Evelyn," he whispered. No answer. He dropped to his knees, shaking, trying to wake her, trying to fix it, but it was too late. The city outside kept moving, sirens in the distance, a car alarm echoing somewhere down the block. But inside that small Brooklyn apartment, time stopped. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. James didn't get far. He made it as far as the Brooklyn Bridge before the weight of it all finally caught up to him. His clothes were soaked from the rain, his hands trembling, still stained with Evelyn's blood. The city buzzed around him like nothing had happened, cabs honking, couples laughing on sidewalks, life moving forward without pause. But for James, time had splintered. He knew he couldn't outrun what he'd done. He turned himself in the next morning. The police didn't need much. The scene at the apartment, the neighbors who heard shouting, the broken look in James's eyes when he walked into the precinct. The trial moved quickly. His lawyer pleaded it down to manslaughter, citing emotional distress, intoxication, lack of intent. It didn't matter much to James. He barely spoke. He didn't care about the sentence. Nothing the system could give him would ever match what he had already lost. Prison wasn't the punishment, living with it was. Every day, he replayed it all in his mind, the moment he read that email. The argument, the fall, Evelyn's eyes. He thought he'd been hurt by a secret, but now he understood. The real damage came not from what she kept from him, but from how he responded to it. He wrote letters he never sent, to her parents, to the version of himself he used to be. He read books on gender identity, on trauma, on forgiveness. None of it could change what had happened, but it was all he had left, to try and understand, even a little, the pain he had caused. And every night, as the cell lights dimmed, he would close his eyes and see her, not in anger, not in fear. Just her, smiling, the way she did on quiet mornings when the world felt far away and love still felt simple. The news spread quickly. A young woman found dead in her Brooklyn apartment. Her husband arrested hours later. But it wasn't until the media uncovered that Evelyn was a trans woman that the story truly caught fire. Headlines twisted the tragedy into something sensational. Comment sections filled with venom. People who'd never known her, never known them, had opinions, loud ones. Evelyn's parents, quiet and private people from upstate New York, were thrust into a spotlight they never asked for. They'd loved their daughter fiercely, supported her through every part of her transition, but now they were left to grieve her publicly, as if the world had some claim to her story. In their pain, they chose grace. Instead of fighting the noise, they created something with purpose, the Evelyn Foundation, a non-profit in her memory, dedicated to education, advocacy, and support for transgender individuals and their families. No more secrets, no more shame, was the tagline. They held talks in schools, built safe spaces for LGBTQ+ youth, and lobbied for better legal protections. Their grief became a kind of fuel, transforming pain into movement. James's family, on the other hand, was torn apart. His mother visited him in prison, but she didn't know what to say anymore. His father never came. Friends drifted away, some out of judgment, others out of confusion. And James didn't blame them. He hardly recognized himself either. Still, even in isolation, he followed news of the foundation. He read every article, watched every interview Evelyn's parents gave. He didn't expect forgiveness, and none was offered, not yet. But there was something redemptive, almost sacred, in knowing that her story didn't end with him. That her life, and even her death,